Department of Chicano Studies. On behalf of the Department of Chicano Studies, I want to welcome you to the first of two public lectures on Latin America by Carlos Fuentes, our distinguished guest and Regents Lecturer in Chicano Studies. If I may, on a very personal note, and with Mr. Fuentes' kind indulgence, I would like to dedicate tonight's proceedings to my less than two-day-old young daughter that was born yesterday on Mother's Day. Juliana Rosa Garcia. Before embarking on my introduction, let me remind you that the second lecture by Mr. Fuentes will be this Thursday, May the 15th at 4 p.m. here in Campbell Hall. The topic will be the intellectual tradition in Latin America. I also want to take this opportunity to thank various people who made this week possible. First, a special thanks to Margarita Nieto, who initiated the possibilities of inviting our distinguished guest to serve as Regents Lecturer in the Department of Chicano Studies. Yes. This week's activities is as much Margarita's doings as anyone else. Second, Roman Bartiak and his staff in Arts and Lectures who coordinate the Regents Lecture program and who have been immensely helpful. Third, to Chancellor Huttenbach, who provided us with additional financial support to make this week possible. Fourth, to Fred Williams, Chair of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, who has generally assisted in this week's program. Fifth, to Ray Huerta, our Affirmative Action Officer here at UCSB, who has likewise been helpful in planning to ensure the success of this week. To Rolando Romero of the Spanish and Portuguese Department, who assisted in the logistics of Mr. Fuentes' visit. And to my staff in the Department of Chicano Study, Wilma Gomez and Maria Teresa Boschi, for patiently but loyally putting up with the hectic pace of sponsoring activities such as this, as well as other programs that we have sponsored this year. Needless to say, but I will say it anyway, to my colleagues, the faculty of the Department of Chicano Studies, who have enthusiastically supported this week's activities, and who recognize the importance of the department's reaching out to wider audiences. This recognition has propelled us in the Department of Chicano Studies over the years to sponsor social, cultural, and intellectual activities around issues that affect not only Chicanos, but other citizens of this country, as well as the international community. That relationship was most vividly manifested in our support in organizing the successful conference on Central America and South Africa this past February. This department is not only committed to being at the center of intellectual and cultural activities here at UCSB, but in conjunction with our students through El Congreso, to serving as reminders that all of us, as educated men and women in the humanist culture of a university, must relate to the contemporary condition facing other human beings in the world. It is with this in mind that this department has paid particular attention to the recent and ominous events in Central America. And it is with this in mind that we work to secure this week's distinguished Regents Lecture in the Department of Chicano Studies for an individual such as Carlos Fuentes, who is committed to the goals that we share in the department. In these dark days, with war clouds hovering over Central America, this country, the United States, needs to hear the voice of reason and moderation. Such a voice is Carlos Fuentes. Carlos Fuentes, to many of you, needs no formal introduction, but for our general audience, permit me to summarize his career. Carlos Fuentes was born in Panama City, Panama in 1928. His parents were both Mexican, and his father, Dr. Rafael Fuentes, was a career diplomat and Mexican ambassador to Holland, Panama, Portugal, and Italy. Our distinguished guest attended primary school in Washington, D.C., secondary schools in Santiago de Chile and Buenos Aires, and preparatory school and college in Mexico City. He studied law at the School of Law of the National University of Mexico and also in Geneva, Switzerland. Besides his illustrious literary career, Carlos Fuentes has been a writer who sees no divorce from being a writer and a political actor. His public career has spanned from being a member of the Mexican delegation to the International Labor Organization in Geneva during the early 1950s, to Director for International Cultural Relations in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico City from 1956 to 1959, and to serving as Mexico's ambassador to France from 1974 to 1977. Writing and public service have always been linked to teaching for Carlos Fuentes. In this capacity, he has taught and lectured at numerous and distinguished institutions of higher learning. Some of these positions include Spencer Lecturer at Harvard University, Montgomery Fellow at Dartmouth College, Edward LaRocque Tinker Visiting Professor in the School of International Relations at Columbia University, Adjunct Professor of English and Romance Languages at the University of Pennsylvania. Since 1984, he has been Visiting Professor of Comparative Literature and of Romance Languages and Literatures at Harvard. This spring, he was also a Senior Fellow in the Society for the Humanities at Cornell University, and later this year will serve as Simón Bolívar Professor at Cambridge University in England. Carlos Fuentes is also a permanent member of the Colegio Nacional de México, has been a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C., and a fellow of the humanities at the Council for the Humanities at Princeton University. Not restricting his writing to fiction, our distinguished guest has likewise, in the tradition of Latin American intellectuals, pursued an active career in journalism. He was founder and editor of Revista Mexicana de Literatura from 1955 to 1959, and founder and editor of the political review El Espectador from 1959 to 1962. He has written extensively for such newspapers as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Boston Globe, the New York Review of Books, The Nation, Le Monde, Sunday Times in England, Die Zeit in Germany, El País in Spain, and La Nación in Buenos Aires. But of course, he is perhaps known first and foremost as Mexico's premier novelist and one of the major Latin American novelists of this century, and part of the recent international recognition of Latin American literature known as the Boom. His novels include La Región Más Transparente, Where the Air is Clear, 1958, Las Buenas Conciencias, The Good Conscience, 1959, La Muerte de Artemio Cruz, The Death of Artemio Cruz, 1962, Aura, 1962, Zona Sagrada, Holy Place, 1967, Cambio de Piel, A Change of Skin, 1967, Cumpleaños, Birthday, 1969, Terra Nostra, 1975, La Cabeza de la Hidra, The Hydra Head, 1978, Una Familia Lejana, Distant Relations, 1980, and most recently, Gringo Viejo, The Old Gringo, 1985. Later this year, his statement on the European conquest of the Americas will be published as Cristobal Nonato, Christopher Unborn. Our distinguished guest has also written collections of short stories in addition to plays, literary criticism, and political essays. His novels have been translated into several languages, including English, French, German, Italian, Danish, Swedish, Japanese, Hebrew, Russian, and Chinese. He has received various literary prizes, including the Biblioteca Breve Prize in Barcelona for A Change of Skin in 1967, the Javier Villarrutia Prize in Mexico City for Terra Nostra in 1975, the Romulo Gallegos Award in Caracas for Terra Nostra in 1977, the Alfonso Reyes Prize in Mexico City for the corpus of his work in 1979, and the National Prize for Literature in Mexico in 1984. His lecture tonight is entitled The Contemporary Crisis in Latin America. Colleagues, members of the UCSB community and of the larger Santa Barbara community, without further ado, let me present our distinguished Regents Lecturer in the Department of Chicano Studies, Carlos Fuentes.
Thank you, Professor Garcia. Everything you mentioned isn't worth a bean next to the birth of your daughter Juliana, so let me congratulate you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, when Professor Mario Garcia invited me to talk about the Latin American crisis, I said, okay, here I am, I'm going to rattle off these statistics. We're burdened by a $360 billion debt in Latin America. We must pay $45 billion on the debt annually. These $45 billion are an equivalent to 70% of the gross national product extracted from domestic savings. They're also equivalent to 48% of all export earnings. Latin America has become an exporter, a net exporter of capital when it needs it most. On top of that, throughout the region, unemployment is running at 40%. Per capita income is down 15% since 1982. Inflation is up and expectations are way down. This poses an extreme danger to the new fragile democracies of the region. The people more and more perceive austerity as imposed from outside, from abroad. Social programs are stalled. Poverty is rising. We could talk about debt relief. We could talk about trade and foreign investment. But all of this you can find in the financial pages of the LA Times or the New York Times, which is where most news about Latin America appear today. And thinking about the problem, I said, my God, it is a financial problem, but it is not only a financial problem, and it is much more than a financial problem. What we are facing in Latin America is the crisis of the model of development in each and every one of our nations. What is being radically posed by Latin Americans as we approach the 5th centennial of the discovery of the New World, which will take place in 1492, are a series of questions. Are we viable nations? What is our tradition? Can we extract a model of our own, an authentic model for development from this history, from this experience, from this tradition? Can we project a future from our past, in other words? Can we speak with authenticity? Do we have a nation? Do we want a nation? And in this case, what kind of a nation do we want? Now, these are questions that I must be absolutely frank with you, I can only answer partially, and in terms of my own imagination, not with a lot of statistics. My response has to come not from statistics or from political calculations, but from the heart of my own personal and national sentiment. So let me invite you more than to a statistical or political conference on the crisis in Latin America, to the crisis as seen within the dialectics of what I would call nation and narration. Nation and narration, and speak of the crisis in Latin America, in Mexico, with the broader view of the novelist, of a writer concerned with social reality, but finally a novelist, not an economist. And a novelist, like his nation, has dreams and nightmares. And what I want to read today is a dream and a nightmare. And they come from the novel I have just finished. This novel is called, as Mario Garcia announced a while ago, Cristobal Nonato, Christopher Unborn. And it is a novel that takes place in 1992, which is when we shall be, I hope, celebrating the 5th centennial of the discovery of the New World by Columbus. Now, in 1992, Mexico is in a very sorry state in this novel. Yucatan, for example, is being administered by the Club Med simply to pay the interest of the debt, which has now come to $1,492 billion by that year. Then the oil-producing states of Chiapas, Tabasco, and Campeche have become something called the Chitacam trusteeship, which is administered in its turn by Exxon in order to pay for the principal of the debt. The state of Veracruz is isolated. Nobody knows exactly what goes on there. Is there an agrarian socialist revolution going on? Or has Veracruz been invaded by the U.S. Marines? Well, your information depends on the TV channel you may watch. But there is a fact, and it is that the best-selling novel in the United States in 1492 is written by Norman Mailer, and it is called Why Are We in Veracruz? In the frontier, there is a new nation called Mex-America. And Mex-America is a strip that runs 50 miles north and south of the present border, all the way from the Pacific, from what is now called in the novel San Diego, to all the way to the Gulf Coast, to Kilmores, which used to be known as Matamoros. This state, Mex-America, has declared a plague on both your houses, doesn't want anything to do with centralized orders from Washington or Mexico City. There is a mysterious talk about a new entity called Pacifica, but on the Pacific Rim, nobody knows exactly what it is, a new kind of utopia. And there are a series of contests being held in Mexico. One is the Christopher Columbus contest, which will be born by the male child born, the first male child born in 12 October 1492. The protagonists of the novel, whose name are Angel and Angeles, set out to create this child in the hot sands of Acapulco one day. The child shall be called Cristobal Palomar. His father is really, what really obsesses the father is the need to destroy Acapulco. He has an almost irrational hatred for Acapulco. Why wasn't it destroyed in the earthquake of 1985 instead of Mexico City, since the epicenter was in Acapulco, etc.? The mother, Angeles, really just wants to prove that a Mexican woman can read right through the dialogues of Plato before she dies, and she's having a very hard time doing this. The grandparents were called Diego and Isabel Palomar. They were inventors. And in order to create a new scientific ethos in Mexico, they decided to create inventions that would suppress superstitions. For example, an invention of theirs is that when a glass breaks, there's a thing they have, an invention, whereby the glass is immediately reconstituted again, or by which a black cat, when crossing in front of you, becomes a white cat, or an invention that hostesses, of course, would love, which is that when you have 13 people at your table, again, they have created a wonderful invention to bring forth a 14th person to the table through a combination of laser beams, etc. But they go too far. They overreach themselves. They decide to create something that will solve the nutritional problems of Mexico, and this is what they call el taco inconsumible, which is a taco that the more you eat it, the more it grows. But they have to, somebody has to eat it first. It is they, and they die. Then there are the great-grandparents, and I come to them because they are the protagonists of the dream I'm going to read. And these are General Rigoberto Palomar, who is a former veteran of the Mexican Revolution, and his wife, Susana Renteria, who is an illegitimate daughter of a cacique from Jalisco called Pedro Páramo. And the general maintains his madness, his particular madness, is that he maintains contradictorily, but at the same time, that the Mexican Revolution is not over yet, but that the Mexican Revolution has achieved all its ends at the same time. He has in this chapter I'm going to read a dream of the past. It has to do with a memory, an imagination of Benito Juárez, who was the president of Mexico, who fought the conservatives and fought the French after the conservatives asked for the French intervention to restore them, with the Emperor Maximilian. Benito Juárez, who won the battle of the Cinco de Mayo that all of us celebrate in Mexico and the Southwest recently. And the title of the chapter is Juárez no debió de morir, Juárez should not have died, which was the title of a beautiful danzón that we used to dance as young men and women in places such as the Waikiki, the Salón Mexico, the Rio Rosa, under blue lights, and with shoeless girls and with placards saying in the walls, don't throw cigarette butts on the floor, the girls might burn their feet. The quotation I put at the head of this chapter comes from Ramón López Velarde, the Mexican poet, and it says, we return to our homeland out of love and poverty. prodigal sons of a nation we cannot even define, we begin to examine it. Ay, 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 ay. Grandfather Rigoberto Palomar awaked yelling, "A nightmare." "It's nothing." Grandmother Susana Renteria, lying beside him, consoled him. "You were dreaming of an uprising, an erection?" "No, no," laughed his wife. "No, nothing but your old balls, no insurrection." "Ah, such an innocent child," my great-grandfather General Palomar said to his 75-year-old wife, my great-grandmother, on the strength of his 91 years. "Do you remember, Susie?" "Don't tell me you dreamed about me, Rigo." His wife smiled, pausing, and stroked her husband's silkily white mustache, because remember, you said it was a nightmare. He fell on her, smothering her with kisses on her hair, on her plump cheeks, and on her mouth, until his yellow and brown striped pajama sleeve ripped at the shoulder, and they both laughed. She asked him to take off the shirt and sat on one side of the bed to mend it, her legs too short to touch the ground, pumping as if she were in a swing. Don Rigoberto, a bony old man, hugged himself on his side of the bed. She sighed. "Tell me about your dream, Rigo." "Ah, my sweet innocent, that's just what I'm going to do. I dreamed I was about 20 years old, and one of Senor Juarez's guard up in the north of the Republic, being chased by the French and the Mexican traders who joined with them. 2 years on the road, Susie. You can't imagine what it was like then, in broken-down old buggies and ox-drawn carts, lugging the archives of the nation with us, and President Juarez with a kind of portable desk in his black carriage where he wrote and signed things. Imagine my innocent girl from Mapimí to Nazas to San Pedro del Gallo to La Zarca, from Cerro Gordo to Chihuahua, and from there straight north through the desert. Every day fewer soldiers, less water, less food, and he bore it all because, as he told us when he began the long journey, there will never again, in all our history, be another opportunity like this. And when we got tired, Susana, or asked ourselves what the shuck we were doing there, pushing carts loaded with old papers through mud holes and over rocky ground, we would remember his words, and we understood them damn well what he meant. It was in our power to save Mexico from a foreign invasion and an empire imposed by arms. That was our opportunity to defend a lawful system that for the moment had been reduced to some old archives and a desk on wheels. I don't think our country has ever been more needy or more beloved by Mexicans than it was then. Oh, my heart's delight, haven't you seen how ugly Mexico becomes when it is taken over by the rich and arrogant? Well, it was beautiful in my dream. But what could I have said then, my little doll? Nothing. I was a wooden lancer, a toy soldier, a cigar store Indian, protecting a president who one day had made up his mind to distribute the wealth of the church a little more evenly, to see that man's law was respected, the better to respect God's law, and to deprive the army and the aristocracy of their powers and forge ahead and let the law of God, the Christ, rain down on him with all its fury from heaven and from hell as well, if need be. He defeated the conservatives, but the conservatives left him with a foreign debt of 15 million pesos, the price of a few government bonds that some French businessmen bought in exchange for a pound of Mexican flesh. The bonds had no real value. The debt France demanded did. Juarez ordered suspension of payment. Napoleon III replied with an invasion and an empire. I used to watch Don Ben, so serious, so dignified, so, how shall I say it, Susanita, so sure of his role in history, as if he never doubted for a minute that in spite of all its woes, Mexico would end up as an independent and democratic nation, just like he never doubted that it was up to him to see that it was so, no ifs, ands, or buts. I wanted to say to him, listen, Don Benito, what if something happens to you? Will the country be defeated? Will it give up the fight, or what? I don't know what he would have said. A lot of people said they knew, though. He thought he was indispensable. And as he was a hero and poor and a man of law, no one would dispute it. And there was something else in his favor. He was a perfect husband and father. He protected his family. He sent them to the United States where they would be safe. He wrote regularly and lovingly to his wife and his children. I hate to say it, Susie, but he began to irritate me. I watched him sitting like an idol in his carriage, calm and collected, all in black cape, black frock coat and trousers, black top hat, a Zapotec idol decked out as God knows what. From watching him so much, I came to believe, now listen carefully, my darling, that the man was disguised as something he feared and loved at the same time. What made him so different? Occasionally, he let it escape in conversation. He had been a young Indian boy, a shepherd in Oaxaca, an illiterate who couldn't even speak Spanish until he was 12. In the years between the time he was 12 and 22, just imagine, my love, that peasant boy, that dispossessed air of a ghostly culture as ancient as it was dead, Susana, that boy lost in the light of a magical simplicity, learns to view his past, his own past, as a kind of irrational night. Can you imagine, girl, a horror from which he has to save all Mexicans? In 10 years, he learned to speak Spanish. He learns to read and write. He becomes a liberal lawyer and admirer of European revolutions, of North American democracy, of the laws of France. He marries a white middle-class girl. He dresses like a Western professional man. And when he finds himself fully armed with the learning and the laws of Western civilization, whap, Susanita, that same world he so greatly admires turns against him, denies him the right to modernize Mexico, denies Mexico its independence, and I wept for Benito Juarez. On my word, I did, Angel, when I realized all this. This man was tragic, divided, masked by the great contradiction that from that time forward was to be our own, that of all Mexicans, to feel ill at ease with our past, but even more ill at ease with our present, to be constantly at odds with the modernity they said was going to make us happy, but left us miserable instead. How sadly, Señor Juarez gazed at those deserts we were hurrying through day after day. Not even the cactus was his, not even those yuccas. And I long to say to him, let go a little, don't bend, don't hold everything inside. I, the most lowly of your guards, say this because I love you. I spent hours watching you through the little window in your carriage, rocking to the rhythm of my wheezing, starving horse and to the lurching and jolting of your decrepit old carriage. Ink sprays all over you, Señor Presidente. Stains spread over your paper. Your top hat slips to one side, but you sit there as unmoved as if you were presiding over a tribunal in Poitiers. But you're not. You're here with us with nothing for miles around but mesquite and Apache plume. Take a good look around you. Don't you see what Durango is? Take a look at Coahuila. Ay, Susie, baby, ay, ay, ay. The first time I ever saw him crack a little was when his common sense told him, listen, you can't go on hauling all the archives of the Republic from the time of Guadalupe Victoria's term up to today as if they were little packets of love letters. We're hauling tons of paper, Don Benito. And no matter how much you, the same as every blessed coyote in our blessed Roman legal tradition, believes that paper creates reality, there's a limit. We're going to drown in paper. Are we going to lose the paper war just like we lost the pastry war in '38 against these same frogs? I give you my word, his mask cracked a little when he resigned himself to leaving the archives hidden in a cave in the Sierra del Tabaco near Coahuila. He said goodbye to those papers as if they were his own children, as if he had just buried sheets of paper that had a human soul. He never closed his door. It was a principle with him. The door always open so that anyone who wanted to see him could come in. And also so everyone could see he had nothing to hide, clear as crystal. At times he went so far as to give himself the luxury of turning his back to the door as he sat down to write in the peasant huts, the ruined old missions, the homes of friends along this road we all thought led to exile. Except for him. For him, it was just a road in the desert, which isn't the same thing. The point is that with all his conscious heroics of a leader destined to be immortalized in marble, he made the task very difficult for a lancer man who had the responsibility of protecting him, me. Once, right in the middle of the desert of Chihuahua, tired after riding all night, he saw me standing guard at the door open onto the desert, half dozing because it was near dawn, but still propped on my lance I'd stuck into the hard ground. He smiled and told me that the gray clumps of creosote bush all around us were smarter than people were. Look, there in the dawn light, the whole hill dotted with perfectly spaced clumps, an almost legal symmetry like a good civil code, he said. Did I know why they grew like that? I said, I didn't. The clumps keep their distance, he told me, because their roots are poisonous. They kill any plant that grows too close to them. And we have to keep our distance, respect one another to survive. That's what peace is all about, he said, and walked quickly back to his chair where he quickly wrote something down, brief and surely immortal. No, I wanted to say, I don't want to watch you while you go to the bathroom, while you're wiping yourself, Don Benito, or picking your nose, Señor Presidente. Not that, but just once, I would like to see you doing something that wouldn't offend your dignity or mine. Yes, like maybe washing your teeth, Señor Juárez. I'd like to see that, or shining your boots, because you can't tell me you don't do that. Here we are trooping through snakeweed and barrel cactus, and you with no aide de camp, unlike Maximilian, but your shoes shinier than an Austrian archduke's. How do you do it? Would you lose any of your dignity if someone saw you shining your own shoes, Señor Juárez? We celebrated Columbus Day, El Día de la Raza, on October 12, 1864, in the city of Chihuahua, in the home of Governor Luis Krill. And President Juárez spent the day reading old newspapers in English that somehow had gotten there from New Orleans. He had memories of that Louisiana port where he'd been exiled by the dictator Santa Anna, where he'd earned his living rolling cigars in a tobacco factory. And now his beloved papers rolled up in a cave in the Sierra del Tabaco, the irony of it, and learned English as his children were now doing in their schools in New York City. One of the news stories caught his attention. A gringo named E.L. Drake had discovered a new substance while digging 20-meter wells in western Pennsylvania. According to the story, the substance was extracted from wells in deep beds of sedimentary rock. This substance occurs in liquid or gaseous state, Señor Juárez, but in either form, it can be readily substituted, according to Mr. Drake, for increasingly scarce whale oil in providing bright and cheap lighting for modern cities. Juárez commented on this novelty to Señor Krill's other guests there in Chihuahua, and an engineer said that lighting cities was important, of course, but that this famous petroleum, as it had been named, had an even greater potential for use in engines, for steamships and trains and factories. At that instant, I saw a dream flash across the usually impassive face of Benito Juárez, Susanita, as if he imagined himself swiftly crossing the desolation of the Republic, liberated from the accidents of terrain and climate, both so harsh, my girl, both so hostile to man. He shook his head. He cast out the dream. The important matter at hand was to win back the Republic, inch by inch, slowly, with love and in poverty. Maybe Susie, Don Benito Juárez even imagined himself, who say he didn't, flying in an airplane from Mexico City to El Paso, Texas, with a fueling stop in Chihuahua. But then he would have lost the country for sure. He had to demonstrate that it was our country, that we were planted here, that like the ocotillo, we had deep roots and thorny branches. Just try to yank us out. Just see who wanted to come live with us in this poverty. This was no fiesta. That was the unique opportunity as he saw it. There will never again in all our history be another opportunity such as this. Not petroleum, Susanita, but dignity. Can you imagine Don Benito Juarez pocketing the take from the oil boom of the 70s to fly off in a Grumman jet for a little whirl in Paris, maybe with a little fuel stop in Las Vegas to get in a game or two of poker at the Sands Hotel? Can you imagine? Ay, 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 ay. But to get back to my dream, my death-filled dream, as you will see. First he heard that his favorite son, young Pepe, was sick. All the intuition, all the instincts, you might even say all the fatalism of that Zapotec Indian disguised as a French lawyer came out then. This Indian fatalism, innocent little Susie, told him that his Pepito was already dead, and that to spare him suffering, out of respect for the statue, you know, they weren't telling him. Ah, Susanita, you should have seen him there in Chihuahua, worried about his baby boy, the son he always called my treasure, my pride, my hope. He crumbled then. He went out of his head. His letters were covered with splotches. After a while, he composed himself, but forever after, I saw him as a victim of the trait he thought he had left behind, the Indian sentiment of fatality. Then, by sheer will, he again became the man he had always been. He received no news from home, the mail service, the uncertainties of the time. Sure. When his premonition was proved true, my darling girl, all he could do was wander around like a ghost, pacing the corridors of Senor Krill's house in Chihuahua. My adored son is dead. He's dead, my adored son. There is nothing I can do now. It seemed that Pepe's death was the beginning of a whole chain of disasters. Shortly after, Senor Juarez received news of the death of President Abraham Lincoln, and then in July, the French launched a general offensive against Republican resistance in the north, and in August, we had to flee Chihuahua towards the frontier, but no farther. Captured in Mexico, cornered in Mexico, but never outside Mexico, he said. Exile, never. Let no man ever say that Benito Juarez had deserted his country. Senor Don Luis, I heard him tell his friend Governor Creel, who had urged him to save himself by crossing the frontier, you know this state better than anyone. Show me the most inaccessible, the highest, most arid hill, and I will climb it. And there I will die of hunger and thirst, wrapped in the flag of the Republic, but never one step outside the Republic. So we went bumping off again in the buggies and carts through the tumbleweed and the Mormon tea. My Susanita, no land of sweet pineapple that, no, nothing but thirsty salt setters there. So shall I tell you more, how one night in a hut in the Chihuahua desert, when I was standing guard, stationed beside a ruined adobe wall, he closed the door. He's going to bed early, I said to himself. But in a moment, I heard him crying. I didn't dare interrupt him then, but I got busy the next day, and when it was time for me to go off guard, Susie, I told myself that if he didn't cry again, that would be the end of it. Well, as someone is reported to have said to Bonaparte in France, not even a concierge should poke her nose beyond the front door. Yes, the matter dies there, but if the old man cries again, is something wrong, Señor Presidente? No, Rigo, nothing. Forgive me, Señor Presidente. Yes, Rigo. You know I never butt in where I'm not called, yes? But won't you unburden yourself just a little? He was no saint. There was no reason he should be. It was enough to be a hero. There are many unknown heroes who don't have a street named after them, even less a statue, but a saint. What does that do for anyone? He told me that night about his love affairs, about his children outside his marriage, about his son Tereso, who was ugly and brave and, like his father, resisting the invaders, and about his poor, suffering daughter Susana, like you, my love, the same name, did you know that? An invalid in Oaxaca, condemned to virginity, drugged to kill the pain. And what about my love for my eldest daughter, my faraway, suffering, strange daughter, imprisoned in an artificial dream, Susana? I sent the country girl to him, told her not to be shy, told her that she knew what she was doing was good, that Senor Juarez was good too, that he could see her with the same eyes I did. I, Rigoberto Palomar of the 2nd Corps of Lancers of the Republic, neither better nor worse. Just because we were in this campaign, that didn't mean life had come to an end. He would see her, she with her apple cheeks and eyes black as cherries, her hair falling to her waist, her body like a fresh clay jug. She even had a sweet name, Dulces Nombres. That's what they called her. Her blouse crackles with starch. She's come barefoot in silence. Someday she will die. Her hands already foretell mourning. I wanted her for myself, Senor Juarez, but I give her to you. You need her. We need you to need this chaste but lustful girl. You need a night of love, Don Benito, a delicious, tender girl, sweet as cinnamon and brown sugar, to shake you like an earthquake, so close to the source of life that maybe in the moment of her surrender, she may even seem an answer to death. Take her, Senor Juarez. Take this country girl, rid yourself of your sadness, win the war, recover the country. Love this girl as you loved your dead son, as you love your invalid daughter. This is as good a reason to close the door as going to the bathroom or to open it to receive friends. Don't turn into a statue on me, Senor Juarez. Don't die on us yet. I closed the door after them, Susana, and risked a court-martial. I abandoned my post. You see, innocent baby, I didn't want to hear anything. This night was his. He deserved it like nobody ever did. I prayed that he would be happy. I didn't want to rob him even in my thoughts of his pleasure. So I began to think sad and impossible thoughts, Susanita. Imagine, what if Senor Juarez does win? The Republic will be poorer than ever. How can it pay for the debts piled up by the conservatives, the empire, the war? How can the country be rebuilt? I said to myself, closing my eyes in the night of the desert, cold like a chamber at the bottom of the sea, if only Senor Juarez had that Pennsylvania gringo Drake's invention to light up all the cities of the world and all the factories of the world like glowing coals. Ah, if only instead of owing 15 million pesos to the French, Don Benito Juarez had received $15 billion every year for exporting liquid fossils. That's why I screamed, Susana. I had this horrible nightmare. Don't you worry, Rigoberto. Your dream will turn out all right. This is the chapter on this dream. Now I hope I have time for the nightmare, if it isn't too late for you. We spoke about this partitioned Mexico of 1992. Well, the rest of the world is not much better off. Russia, for example, has cast off its detested German ideological mask, Marx and Engels, and once more shines with the purity of its Slavic Orthodox soul. The Communist Party was not able to modernize the USSR. There were not enough automobiles for young people to go out and do some private necking outside the apartment buildings with the babushkas and all that. There were no personal computers admitted because this would have transformed each citizen into the actor and author of his own samizdat. So finally, the Communist Party is overthrown by something called the Orthodox Party of the Third Rome. Russia wakes up one morning with a Caesaro-Papist first secretary, gives up the east to the Mongols, the south to the Muslims, the west to Lithuania, and closes itself into the dimension of the old dukedom of Muscovy with the slogan, the Novgorod, the better, and sits forever to the right of Ivan the Terrible. The United States has also become a balkanized country through fights, conflicts over the use of energetics, water, technology, the dying smokestack industries, the problems of neo-industrialization, migration to the Sun Belt, the loss of so many tax bases, the political confusion created when Lyndon LaRouche takes over the Democratic Party. The country is mostly an ultra-conservative country, with the exception of what is known then as the Liberal Republic of New England and adjacent islands, Manhattan, Long Island, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket, where all the liberals have gone to live. And the symbol of national unity is a very, very old president sitting in front of invisible TV prompters, his knees wrapped in quilt, embroidered with the slogan, "God is my co-pilot." Mexico tops Rome. We do not offer bread and circus. We offer circus and circus. The party of the opposition, PAN, P-A-N, the National Action Party, is in power. The president is a member of the PAN party. His name is Jesus María y José Paredes, known as Chuchema. But he has to govern with the bureaucracy of the PRI, the technocrats of the PRI, the labor unions of the PRI, the peasant unions of the PRI, the whole apparatus, which poses a radical problem of legitimacy. And Mexico being a world of symbols, where symbols are extremely important, well, the government decides to reach out for the supreme symbol, to construct the supreme symbol. This is the nightmare, which is titled Mother and Doctor. Mother and Doctor. She was seated in front of the mirror. She looked at herself in the dressing room mirror, surrounded by white, backstagey, poured flowering light bulbs. She had no time to remember herself. They had not let her see her own reflection in a mirror for more than a year. The squad of hairdressers and makeup people ascended on her. First, they wiped off her face, the one she walked into the dressing room with. She wanted to see and remember that face at least once. No time. Remember her true face, her first face. That really was not possible. She even came to doubt she ever had a first face. She closed her eyes while her hair was curled in French and refused to accept what she had just been thinking. She decided that this morning, before she was taken out and shown once more, she was going to remember herself. Soon there would be no time. Soon she would be taken away from the mirror. 3 years after her enthronement, they permitted her to see herself in a mirror. But she wanted to attempt the impossible, to recover her own face before this. It was hard because the present was too strong. It washed away her memory and left her abandoned on the isle of the instant, as if the present could be her escape and not, as her soul told her, her prison. She had come to believe that memory was her worst enemy, the shark of a blind and opulent tide which bore her high without ever moving her, a wave fixed forever in the terror of the past. She yawned facing the mirror and decided that this morning, because or in spite of everything, she was going to remember the girl who 5 years ago worked in the secretarial pool of the Ministry of National Patrimony and Industrial Development on Insurgentes Avenue. How was she? The past 5 years seemed an eternity, and how was she to recognize herself in a slender typist, tall but well endowed, they said, with brown rat straight hair, a pale makeup that went begging a bit because she had a nice cinnamon complexion and wore a pantsuit bought at Sears Roebuck. She had a beau, she remembered that. His name was Leoncito, and he was an undertaker in San Luis Potosí Street. He had his own parlor there, not far from the ministry. They met at the Vienna Cafe on the park because it was an oasis in these streets where buses and trucks ran spewing columns of carbon monoxide. In Mexico, said her boss, el licenciado, nader is nadie, no one. And Mexico City is the seat of the Nada con Nader society, or Nader, imperialistic enemy of Mexican development. The bus is vomiting poison on the dying trees. She and Leoncito had drank cappuccinos, had eaten cakes with German names, and he had offered her some tricolored ribbons, green and white and red, the national colors, with the undertaker's favorite acronym stamped on them, R.I.P. He said they were leftovers from the National Independence Day, September 15, the day of the Cry of Dolores, when Father Hidalgo rose in arms against Spain. He told her this to educate her. He wanted her to spruce up a bit, look less simple, so that he could feel proud of her, and he gave her the patriotic ribbons, R.I.P. Even on Independence Day, people die, you know, he said. Naturally, someone laughed at her for coming like this to the office, but she wanted to please Leoncito, her beau, and anyway, they did pay a little more attention to her. She, with her perky-looking ribbons, her tricolor flag, and the RIP, and some withered flowers, the leftovers of recent wakes that Leoncito offered her. That's when two things happened, one after another. Licenciado Federico Robles Chacón became Minister of National Patrimony and Industrial Development, and he arrived blasting the language of economists, and she was called in to take the verbatim notes at an inter-cabinet meeting when Robles Chacón was saying, Mae West does not don her best plumes and diamonds and then go out walking in Central Park at midnight, now does she? And then a fact that forever changed the direction of Mexican history, Robles Chacón, surely because he was speaking about a woman, intuitively looked for a woman at the meeting. He saw her, and his words sort of crumbled and fell from his mouth. That's what we did with our oil policy. He stared at her wilted flowers, her tricolored ribbons, and her 3 funeral initials. He cracked his knuckles as if he were going to dance the jota, and from a nearby closet, a little man, elegant and sleek-haired, appeared looking very stiff. Let's see, Robles Chacón said to this tiny man. Give me the numbers of per capita income in Mexico. Well, if we attend to the parameters of the GIP in global terms and in virtue of imported insumos valued against 75% of exports, yet without omitting the jump in real wages adjusted to, come on, now describe the same situation in Guinea-Bissau, come on. The index of real inflation, which were respectively of 150.6% and 298.8%, we will perceive that the incidence of the former on the demands of goods shall fluctuate. Robles Chacón slapped on the table so that his thick eyeglasses almost fell off. This just goes to show that behind every statistician hides a liar. The only truth you have not heard is that both in Mexico and Guinea-Bissau, the majority of the people is jodida. The statistics expert returned like a sleepwalker to his closet, and Robles Chacón said that the truth in Mexico was that one system was going dead on us and we did not have another system to substitute it with. And since this enchantment is not solved with statistics, we would like to solve it with facts. But since facts are stubborn, and besides, facing them can always lead to chaos, he proposed this morning that we employ neither facts nor statistics, but imagination and symbols. Then he stared at her again. He adjusted his aviator glasses on the bridge of his nose, and he pointed a finger at her, so that she sat there trembling and let her block fall when the minister exclaimed, "You see this girl? You see her? What do you see? A wimpy little secretaria, huh? Well, I see the same thing as the humble Indian Juan Diego saw on a rock strewn with roses in December over 400 years ago. I see a Mexican virgin." Señor. Ay, señor, she blushed. You don't know what you're saying. But he was on his feet, dark and tense, nervous and thin, a sort of bureaucratic Danton at 39, the youngest cabinet member in the government of President Jesus María y José Paredes, rattling away with a conviction that demolished his own personal left-wing ideas in benefit of the system that, lacking any ideas, served the community. He foresaw all the catastrophes, loan piled upon loan, debt on debt, devaluation on top of devaluation, lack of food, hunger, no capacity for import, Argentine inflation, Brazilian inflation, Blue Angel inflation, gringo pressures, then dismemberment. Then he fell back on his seat exhausted, the need to save something. Whatever. Are we going to be a Weimar without democracy or a utopia with symbols? He asked rhetorically. Nobody answered. So Robles Chacón broke the noisy silence, pointing at her again. Oh, Jesus, at her. She's so discreet with her slack suit from Sears Roebuck and the ribbons on her hair that her beau, the undertaker, had. Look at her. Look at that girl. Me, señor, look at me. What do you see, dear colleagues? I know, said the vehement minister, a secretary from the pool. I know. Well, look well at her braids, at her tricolored ribbons. What do you see written on them? I know. You, blind, read R.I.P., but I, with it, read P.R.I. They never left her alone from that moment on. She was taken back to the office. There her mournful ribbons were changed for political ribbons. Then they took her in a white Mercedes to a new house surrounded by walls in the Pedregal, a house to forget in, she said, because she recognized nothing there, nor did she want anything there, and she forgot everything she touched. White walls, white furniture, sculptured out of the white walls like ghosts. She felt captured inside an egg. A house made for a white forgetfulness, yes. Leoncito was sent to sell coffins in Yucatan. She never saw him again. She disappeared inside the white shell in the Pedregal. They didn't let her see anyone, talk to anyone from then on. All she could do was listen to sentimental boleros all over the house, piped by a stereo system everywhere, even into the bathroom, under her pillow, a diet of boleros. Usted es la culpable de todas mis angustias y todos mis quebrantos. And then a cure of solitude that lasted for a full year and 3 months, not knowing what went on outside. The army of hairdressers arrived along with the makeup people, the designers, the hatters, the jewelers, the seamstresses. They invaded it all. They filled the place up with mannequins and stoles, clouds of chiffon and coffers of spangle, platinum wigs and white snakeskin belts. Then one day, they left her alone. Robles Chacon returned with all his people. They looked at her, astonished. What of? They had not let her look at herself during 15 months. The minister had said she didn't need any mirrors right now. She would grow accustomed to them again, later and little by little. Mirrors were banned in the blind mansion in the Pedregal. She could only look at herself in the astonishment of others. Above the always energetic words of Robles Chacon, señores, the more critical the national crisis becomes, the more evident it is that we cannot content ourselves with half measures. Mexico has always saved itself because it has always known how to institutionalize everything, including her vices. Poor Argentina, you know, can't even do that. Even her vices are chaotic and insignificant. Not here. We shall see now. In ancient evenings, when the popular mood was low, the Roman emperors offered bread and circus. Here in Mexico, recently, 2 sporadic solutions have offered only circus, but no bread, a visit from the Pope or a fight with the Americans. Even the most convinced atheist must admit that John Paul's successive visits have not only created popular euphoria, but that happily religion is indeed the opium of the people, and that it creates unthought-of opportunities for commerce, sombreros, balloons, T-shirts, beach chairs, pop bottles, records, and TV spectaculars. But we cannot have the Pope installed in Mexico all year round, can we? Now, señores, I offer you something better. An institution which is all ours, a witch, a sorceress, a nurse to the poor. And they opened the door of her bedroom and pushed the poor thing outside. A jet-age Amazon. And they took her by the hand to the top of the expensive staircase made of white, blinding acrylic. A woman who shall fill the empty jug of national legitimacy, a new mother for Mexico. And they let her go. They let her alone, and she felt she was falling from the top of the circular staircase into an endless barranca, with no hands to save her, with no loving skin next to her. Ancient mother was Our Lady de Coatlicue, she of the skirt of serpents, mother of the gods. But she held back, she closed her eyes. She didn't know if she was going to open them again. So much eyeshadow, rimmel, a powder of stars on her eyelids, on her sticky eyebrows. Impure mother was Our Lady La Malinche, the whore of the conquistador, the impure mother of the first Mexican. And with each step she took down, her injected, inflated, siliconic breasts surgically slapped around until they achieved the desired consistency, the rhythm, the balance necessary to bounce as they now did, in spite of being so crushed and propped up and trembling under a cascade of diamond chokers. Pure mother was Our Lady of Guadalupe, she who redeemed the humble Indian. This is what they taught her during 1 year and 3 months as she listened to the tropical music. Shake your hips, muchacha, move your ass, baby, make it hot, negra, shake your hips, as if you were walking down the Havana boardwalk. The ass is the ace, don't you forget it. And a rebellious mother was Our Lady La Adelita, the camp follower of Pancho Villa's golden warriors, the mother of the revolution, trapped in your girdle, sashed, belted, shaking, full of secrets only she knew about, they told her, a ruby inlaid in her navel, which no one would see, on her belly a white wave and a curly foam, the mouth of her sex sewn together with gold thread and protected by 24 diamonds sharp as shark's teeth, 24 bright hussars, they told her, guarding an entrance forbidden to all. They told her that her temptation would be to offer hatred as if it were hope. Let her then think that she was not real. She was invented, screwed together by precious stones. She was a Frankadenic monster with 40-carat brain plugs. He who dare enter shall be burned to a cinder, drawn, pulverized, drawn and quartered. And secret, our mothers, all the women from whose image we descended but were never able to touch, the movie stars, the vamps, the devourers, the great Roomba dancers and exotic strippers of our immense teenage dreams, Ninon Sevilla, Mapi Cortez, María Antonieta Pons, Dinora Judith, Rosa la más hermosa, Iris Chacón. But her naked feet, she would never use shoes, they said. They ordered, always shoeless, always like the humble virgin of the humblest people, shoeless like the fardel bearers and the slaves. Holy Mother, look at yourself, as naked as a poem. The people shall love your feet because they walked on the earth and on the wind and on the waters until they met me, mamacita. Your feet went out and found your lost child, little mother. The plans of your feet were not made for the frivolous balls of this world, but to walk up the painful calvaries. Your naked feet, your bleeding feet on a road of thorns. Mamacita, shake your hips. I can't stand it no more, but never wear shoes. Think of your sons, Eddie Pies, Eddie Pose, Odi Shoes, Niños Perdidos. And super secret mothers, all the gringas with whom we masturbated and could never have, Marilyns and Lanas and Avas and Ritas and Bettys, but above all the teats of the town, the udder of the ubris, the uberimus, Mae West from the Big Apple, good when she's good but better when she's bad. Mae West, Mother Occidental, Mother West, lost in your white flesh, in your secret shafts, in your fabulous glitter. To have you, stepmother of the West, is to wreak vengeance on all our history of insecurities and submissions. Come on, obey your Latin lover, your banana boss, your dingo daddy. Obey me, my stubborn, big, blonde, her lips like a soft scarlet satin sofa. Yes, you will be able to show that, señora. They stopped calling her muchacha only at the end, only then, señora. Come out on the balcony, señora. Come down the white acrylic staircase without glancing at your feet, señora. Wave at everybody without seeing anybody, señora. And she superimposed on all of them. And we, señores, liberated at last from the cloying sweetness of some of our mothers, the nocturnal terror of others, the unreachable insistence of these, the intimate and familiar scorn of they. Here is our borderline legitimation, brothers and colleagues. Here is our permanent prize, the source of all power in Mexico, the supreme construction of macho supremacy boys, the perfect mixture of Mae West, La Cuatlicue, and the Virgin of Guadalupe, a symbol, the greatest human symbol, a mother, the name where biology has a soul, nature becomes transcendental, and sex becomes history. La Mama, señores. And Minister Robles Chacon offered his hand on the last step to the incredible apparition. Señores, I give you Our Lady Mama Doc. let her hand fall. He was himself tired, a Jupiter without glory, a devaluated Pygmalion, saying with his calmest voice that bureaucracies end up by creating what they plan. Mama Doc shall prove that the secret of the system is its secret. The important thing now is to maintain the momentum, señores. I give her to you. She never saw him again. One moment, she even thought she was falling in love with him. Madness, madness. They put her on the white Mercedes with blind black windows, painted silver on the outside. A motorcycle square led her to the National Palace. She was taken up a secret elevator and pushed out on a balcony. She knew what she had to do: cry, thank, wave, as if everyone were clapping and hurraying and crying with her. And then they, the dark night crowd of 1 million Mexico City dwellers, in this night of castles on fire and bands and rockets and dead stars and showers of gold, would from now on link their national fiesta, their September 15th, no longer with a president or a liberator, but with her, she who could not be devalued, the mother who returned on her enslaved feet, her feet looking for her children, her ideal feet. Is there a Mexican alive today in the year of Our Lady of 1992, when this polyphonic gestation of the child Cristobal Palomar and of his forthcoming trips around an oceanic egg take place, who can forget the supreme instant of our national destinies in which the giant spotlight was thrown on the central balcony of the palace on the night of September 15, 1991, that night of flying gold when the only cornucopia in Mexico was a castle of light and the precious stones of the fleeting rocket, when the light from the spotlight turned away from El Señor Presidente and his family and his cabinet and his Secret Service men in order to tremble for an instant, undecided, and then pose itself as white and brilliant as the object of its caresses on her. She that night, with her mountain of platinum curls and her face whiter than the moon and her skirt bright with green reptilian scales and her fat little feet white and naked, now that she appeared, why, she made believe that she levitated. She rose above the bronze railing and showed her naked feet, Our Lady, her unshod feet delicately posed on the horns of a bull. Who was to look at the president now, resigned to this for the good of the system? With this heavenly apparition, the subtle sum of all our mothers and lovers waved the national flag over the heads of 1 million jodidos and cried, "Do you realize it, señores? She didn't make speeches. She didn't remember the national heroes. She didn't damn the Spaniards. Nothing. She just gave el grito de dolores, the cry of pain. Ah! Right here she screamed as if she were giving birth to the crowd who looked at her astonished, enraptured, a scream that made the bells of the cathedral crack and a pair of fat stone Baroque angels fall, a cry that made itself felt in each and every one of the million souls crowded down there with their three-colored flags and their cotton candy and their popsicles in the form of oil derricks. A cry saying that she was giving birth to all, that finally this ceremony meant something, that at last they understood what this thing about the cry of Dolores was. It's that our little mother is giving birth to us, you little sons of the dark night. Our little mother loves us so much that she suffers for us. Yet that cry is so strong, was also so melodious, so tender, so sweet, that it was heard like a sentimental bolero hummed on a velvet dusk by the sultry voice of Avelina Landin. Ay, 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 mamacita. My father and mother went together to the ceremony. My father screamed back with a love both impassioned and repugnant to that figure that from now on was to occupy the center of our history, prisoner of the Valley of Mexico. What have you gotten yourself into? Robles Chacon looked at his creature from an unlit balcony. He thought of his own mother and father. He had never seen his father, Federico Robles, a ruined banker who died before his son's birth, and his mother, Hortensia Chacon, had never seen him. She was blind. Now he was giving all of Mexico a mother they could see and who could see them. Now he was the father of everyone's mother. He looked at Mama Doc and then at his plural enemy, the people. They would forgive her everything. That was it. The triumph of the people would be to see in her all that they did not have. She would have the right to have everything the rich had, because she came out of the secretarial pool at the ministry and was the fiancée of an undertaker and learned by heart all the boleros ever written by Agustin Lara. She could admit, she could sublime in the name of the system all the corruption of the system. She could admit her love of luxury, her taste for extravagance, her appetite for lavish spending, and she would be pardoned for this, only she, and no one else. What was vice in others, in her would be sincerity, popularity, admiration. Her creator looked at her admiringly with her high platinum hairdo and the cartridge belts crossed over her décolleté, the spangled sash, the naked feet, white as the moon, responding to the acclaim she provoked, trembling and crying for an instant before the masses, but making the masses believe that they made her cry and tremble. And he would have liked to have told her in farewell, seeing her on her throne, securing all by herself at least 50 more years of political stability, without revolutions, with renewed hopes, that the sins of others was to destroy a country in order to satisfy their vanity. But now she could do the same, because knowing that, in spite of or ignoring that, all that is not vanity is pain, muchacha. He corrected himself at once. Excuse me, señora. Then the fireworks spelled out the slogan of the night: no one shall possess her except the people. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for discussion, and I'd like to ask Mr. Fuentes. He has given us in fictional terms what the dreams and nightmares of Mexico and Latin America, and I wonder in contemporary political terms if he could discuss a bit in terms of what are the dreams and nightmares of contemporary Latin America.
There's a question you were making. Why don't we let the crowd, the people ask the question? Yeah? Yeah, sure. I think it's better if I'm going to see a lot of you, and we're going to discuss this a great deal. Perhaps there are some questions from the...
here on the sides, and people want to come up and ask a question. Would you come?
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry if I disappointed you, but it's very difficult. I will talk about this another day also. Huh? We're facing a very difficult political situation throughout Latin America. The armies have stepped back into the wings and have led very fragile democracies administer the crisis. Whether they can do so is highly in doubt. These new governments, let's say the Alfonsín government in Argentina, the Sanguinetti government in Uruguay, the Alan Garcia government in Peru, have a lot of legitimacy, but it is not endless. It will depend on their capacity to take us out of the present crisis. And as I said, it is not only a crisis that depends on the debt and the situation around the debt. We can find debt relief, certainly. I think it's in the cards, it'll come. John Kenneth Galbraith says that the destiny of modern debts is to be adjusted, then rolled over, then declared problem loans, and finally to receive the funeral blessing of non-performing assets. This country didn't pay its debts to Great Britain in the 19th century. It's enormous foreign debt. The problem is the model of development. Whether this model of development we have been using since independence has not reached a final crisis in the present circumstances, and whether we're capable of creating a new model which is not only based on the mirage that countries prosper if their upper classes prosper, this kind of cactus Reaganomics we have been practicing throughout Latin America, which assures a certain growth but a lot of inequity, and finally too many problems for the majority of the people that are not subject to rational solution. But again, I think this is a problem in which we will have to harness all of our imaginations. It is a problem that comes very much from our existence, from our desires, from our dreams and nightmares, what I was talking about today. So we can have a solution of the debt crisis. We can have a solution of economic problems, but if we don't take a good hard look at the model of development itself, I think we will have lost a great opportunity. Of course, the other problem for the very fragile democracies of Latin America is the situation in Central America. And the fact that a war in Central America could create such a response throughout the continent that it would only hasten the unraveling of institutions, the tearing of social fabric, the overthrow of governments. Many, many things could happen. There is a very general opposition to such a war in Latin America, not at times because of special love for Nicaragua, the Sandinistas, but because of great concern for what might happen to us if such a thing happens. This is what I think takes a man like Alan Garcia, the president of Peru, to go to the Senate in Argentina and declare that he will break relations with any country that invades Nicaragua. And there's only one country, of course, that can invade Nicaragua. This is something that would split our nations right down the middle and create terrible havoc. I think it is to be avoided. I think it can be avoided through diplomatic means, through negotiations, and through a little bit of political will and effort on the part of all concerned.
Another question?
I would just like to ask Mr. Fuentes, what can the Mexican people do to get rid of the corruption within the government? The Green Party, you know, you probably belong to the party.
No.
Do you belong to the
No, I don't. I'm sorry to disappoint you again. I don't belong to it.
so many books? I'd like to know, why don't you write a book that tells the truth about the corruption for the last 15 years in Mexico?
15? 15 years, you say? 15 years.
The worst 15 years.
No, please, don't be so modest. You know that, you know that corruption in the court of Charles III of Spain in the 18th century was known as the Mexican ointment? And read my book, the one I've just read, and you'll find the answers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me remind you that Mr. Fuentes' second public lecture will be Thursday at 4 p.m. here in Campbell Hall on the intellectual tradition in Latin America. Thank you very much.